3 places, 1 city, 30 seconds. That's how long it took Israel to wipe out 3 separate gatherings of Iran's top leadership on the night of February 28, 2026. 3 locations, hit simultaneously, before anyone could react, before anyone could escape. And the man who had led Iran for decades, Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, was killed in his own compound in Tehran. Think about that. The most protected man in the most secretive regime in the Middle East. Gone. In under a minute. This wasn't luck. This wasn't guesswork. Someone knew exactly where they'd be. Let me walk you through what has unfolded over the last 42 days, because the speed and precision of this war is unlike anything this region has ever seen. On February 28th, Israel and the United States launched a coordinated surprise attack on Iran while nuclear negotiations were actively underway. The Omani foreign minister had literally just announced a breakthrough. Iran had agreed to stop enriching uranium. Peace was, in his words, within reach. Talks were scheduled to resume on March 2nd, and then the bombs started falling. But here's what makes this so extraordinary. IDF spokesperson Brigadier General Effie Defrin later confirmed that for months before the strike, Israel and the US ran a massive deception operation. They manipulated satellite imagery. They disguised warplanes. IDF commanders quietly drove their official cars home from headquarters and then returned without them, so that surveillance would show nothing unusual. No armed aircraft, no activity. Iran was watching, and they saw nothing. Where 3 separate locations where Iranian regime officials had gathered were struck within half a minute of each other, not one after another, all at once, simultaneously. That kind of precision does not come from satellites alone. That comes from human intelligence, deep inside the system. Think about what this means for the people running Iran's military and intelligence operations right now. Every meeting is a question mark. Every communication could be compromised. Every plan they make, they have to wonder, does Israel already know? That kind of paranoia doesn't just slow things down. It paralyzes decision-making. It makes commanders hesitant. It creates gaps. And gaps in war get people killed. Iran fired back hard after the initial strikes. Hundreds of drones and ballistic missiles at Israel, at US bases across the Gulf, at Bahrain, at Jordan, Kuwait, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE. They closed the Strait of Hormuz. Iranian missiles struck residential buildings in Haifa, Beit Shemesh, Tel Aviv. But here's the number that changes everything. By day 10 of the war, Iranian missile attacks on Israel had dropped by more than 90%. Not 20%, not 50%, 90%. Analysts point to one brutal explanation. Israel and the US had already destroyed up to 3/4 of Iran's missile launchers before they could even be used, including launchers Iran had quietly rebuilt after the 12-day war of 2025. Iran rebuilt them. Israel knew exactly where they were, and destroyed them anyway. Reports suggest that inside the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, there is now a quiet but intense internal investigation. Who leaked? Who was turned? Was it a mole? Was it a technical breach? Was it operational carelessness? They don't know. And that uncertainty is its own kind of weapon. Let me break this down simply. Iran's intelligence structure has multiple layers. You have the Ministry of Intelligence, MOIS. You have the IRGC Intelligence Organization. You have Hezbollah networks acting as an extension. You have proxies spread across Iraq, Syria, Yemen, and Lebanon. Now here's the problem with a system that big. More people means more exposure. More moving parts means more places to fail. For years, Israel's Mossad has been running one of the most aggressive human intelligence operations on the planet. They're not just watching Iran from the outside. Early signs indicate they've been operating from within, recruiting assets, flipping insiders, and accessing communications at levels that should have been impossible. And it appears the results of that long-term penetration are now being cashed in, one by one, strike by strike. But here's where it gets interesting, because this didn't happen overnight. Cast your mind back to 2020, the assassination of Qasem Soleimani, the most powerful military commander Iran had. A man who moved between countries, ran proxy networks, managed billion-dollar operations, and he was hit with precision in broad daylight at Baghdad airport. How did they know exactly where he'd be? Then 2021, Iran's top nuclear scientist, Mohsen Fakhrizadeh, killed inside Iran. Inside the country, by a remote-operated weapon with no Israeli agent physically present. Then a series of explosions at nuclear facilities, sabotage of centrifuges, drone strikes on IRGC bases inside Syrian territory, Each time, the same question. How did they know? And the answer, it seems, is that Iran's security apparatus has been leaking for years. Maybe not all at once. Maybe not catastrophically, but slowly, steadily, like water through a crack in a dam. February 28, 2026 was the moment that crack became a flood. If you're following this story closely, hit like and subscribe. We're breaking this down in real time as it develops. Now here's where it gets even more interesting. Think about the timing. In January 2026, just weeks before the strikes, Iranian security forces massacred thousands of civilians, cracking down on the largest protests Iran had seen since 1979. The economy was collapsing, sanctions had gutted salaries, infrastructure was failing. The streets were turning against the regime. That matters, because that is exactly the environment where intelligence assets get recruited, where officers start wondering if the regime is worth dying for, where loyalty starts to crack. The IRGC and the regular Iranian military have always had a tense relationship. The IRGC is loyal to the supreme leader. The regular military answers to the presidency. These two systems don't always talk to each other. They don't always share intelligence. In some cases, they actively compete. That competition creates blind spots, and blind spots in wartime get exploited. Kamal Karazi, a senior advisor to the supreme leader, was hit in a precision strike targeting his home. He survived initially, then died from his injuries days later. But this was a man who had given an interview just weeks earlier saying Iran could sustain this conflict for an extended period, that there was no room for diplomacy, that the war would end only through economic pain. He was wrong about his own survival window. That strike wasn't random. Someone knew where he lived. Here's where things start to fall apart, completely, for Iran. Their entire military doctrine for 40 years was built on one idea: never fight directly, use proxies, strike from a distance, keep the core hidden. Make yourself impossible to target cleanly. But what happens when the core is no longer hidden? Hezbollah's senior leadership, decimated. Hamas command structure, dismantled. IRGC networks in Syria rolled back. Missile stockpiles destroyed faster than they could be replenished. And now the war has spilled into Lebanon again, with Israel striking across Beirut, the Bekaa Valley, Sidon, and even Christian suburbs that had never been touched before, killing over 300 people in a single day. Israel's defense minister said it plainly: the ceasefire with Tehran does not apply to Hezbollah. These are two separate wars, and the strikes kept coming inside Iran itself. Karg Island, Iran's main oil export hub, hit. The South Pars gas field, the largest natural gas reserve on the planet, targeted. 3 airports in Tehran struck. Iran's largest petrochemical complex destroyed. Power units taken out. Train travel suspended. Universities hit. The United States issued a direct ultimatum: fully reopen the Strait of Hormuz, or face the complete demolition of Iran's power plants and bridges. You have to ask yourself, has any country in modern history faced this level of simultaneous, coordinated dismantling of its military, economic, and leadership infrastructure, and survived it intact? Now let's be careful here. There are a few explanations for how Iran's intelligence failed this badly, and they all lead somewhere dark. One theory is deep human penetration, that Mossad spent years recruiting insiders at senior levels of the IRGC and Iran's security services, that those assets fed Israel the exact locations of leadership gatherings, missile storage sites, and safe houses. If this is true, those assets may still be active. The damage may still be happening right now, in real time. Another possibility is technical. A combination of US cyber operations and signals intelligence cracked Iran's encrypted communications at a level Tehran never anticipated. American and Israeli cyber capabilities are among the most advanced on Earth. Iran may have believed their systems were secure. They were not. Not even close. But there's a third, darker explanation. What if part of this failure is internal? Political? What if factions inside Iran deliberately allowed information to pass through as part of a power struggle? People who wanted negotiations. People tired of the war. People positioning for dominance after Khamenei. In a regime under this much pressure, fighting for survival, with an economy in freefall and streets full of protesters. That kind of internal betrayal becomes more likely, not less. The truth is probably some combination of all three. And that's exactly what makes it impossible for Iran to fully fix. Here's what we don't know right now, and what makes this moment so explosive. Talks are happening in Pakistan. An Iranian delegation has arrived. A fragile, incomplete ceasefire exists on paper. one that Iran says must cover Lebanon, and one that the US and Israel say flat out doesn't apply there. Trump told Netanyahu to be a little more low-key in Lebanon. Netanyahu agreed to direct ceasefire talks with Beirut, reportedly at Trump's personal request. But Israel is still striking, still advancing ground forces to encircle towns, still issuing leave or die warnings to civilians in Beirut's southern suburbs. Iran's IRGC has now issued a direct warning. If Israeli attacks on Lebanon do not stop immediately, they will respond. Iran's president called the strikes a violation of the ceasefire itself. And at the center of all this sits Mojtaba Khamenei, the new supreme leader. Son of the assassinated Ali Khamenei. Untested, unproven. His first public statement, revenge. His inherited military, gutted by 90% in 10 days. His intelligence network, penetrated at levels his father never imagined possible. Does he have the capability to deliver on those promises? Or is he a man standing in the ruins of a system that already failed, trying to project strength he no longer fully possesses? Nobody knows, and that uncertainty is precisely what makes the next move so dangerous for everyone. For Iran, the question is simpler and more desperate. How do you fight a war when you can no longer trust your own system? This wasn't just an intelligence failure. This was the moment that the entire foundation of how Iran projects power in this region started to crack. And right now, with talks collapsing, Lebanon burning, and a new Iranian leader making promises of revenge he may not be able to keep, nobody can tell you with confidence how this ends. But one thing is clear. The Middle East that existed before February 28, 2026 is already gone. Subscribe for daily breakdowns of this war as it unfolds in real time.